Hey everyone, my name is James Ayers and I'm excited to tell you a little bit about my experiential module. I live just north of Dallas in a city called McKinney, Texas. And I've taught Spanish, served as a foreign language program coordinator, and now serve as a regional consultant for school districts in this area all across the North Texas region. I love getting to know different people from teachers to administrators and how they're working to build strong LOTE programs and promote foreign languages in their area. Early on in this position, I noted that all schools and teachers and school districts weren't really created equal. Some districts had quite a bit when it came to resources, the money they needed for instructional support, curriculum resources, etc. And others, well, they're not quite as fortunate. There's so many programs and teachers across this region and well across the state of Texas that just don't have what they need to build a strong LOTE program. It became evident that something I could do immediately to help would be to provide a curriculum framework that might meet these teachers where they're at. Historically, the state of Texas, they haven't really provided a LOTE program with curriculum or resources either for instructional purpose or assessment purposes. That leaves districts and teachers to their own resources and devices to create these resources and documents, which takes a lot of time and sometimes requires a big learning curve, or to purchase them from outside vendors. And let's be honest, most districts don't have money to do that. So about a year ago, I started sketching out what this might look like. Having worked on developing curriculum in other districts for the past 15 years, I felt pretty confident and familiar with a lot of the pieces that needed to be put into place. And so with that, I'm excited to present to you the Region 10 LOTE Level 1 Curriculum Framework for the state of Texas. Come on with me as I walk you through what some of this looks like. It all starts with the TEKS in the state of Texas. The TEKS are the Texas Essential Knowledge and Skills that are provided by the Texas Education Agency for all content areas. They define the critical knowledge or skills that students should have in each of the courses. For LOTE classes, the overarching goal defined by the TEKS is communication. They also define the proficiency targets that we're shooting for in each level. For Level 1, you can see the proficiency targets are Novice Mid to Novice High. You can see that the TEKS are also organized into the 3 modes of communication. In each mode of communication, we have what we call student expectations. These are the language functions that we want to see students perform at the desired proficiency levels in the course. I created a TEKS descriptor page as well, which is meant to provide all teachers with a perspective of the proficiency levels that we're targeting as students progress through levels 1 through 4 in their courses. I used the descriptors that were found in both the TEKS and the actual performance descriptors to show how students progress in each area: language function, accuracy, text type, and context. The hope is that as teachers become more familiar with the descriptors in each level and how proficiency develops, that they'll be able to design instruction and assessment opportunities appropriately for the levels that they teach. It will also help them to create a rigorous communicative environment that allows for proficiency to develop. The Year at a Glance document provides an overall outlook of a framework that can be followed as students move from level to level. It's organized and aligned both horizontally and vertically. For each level, units are designed around essential questions related to topics and themes appropriate for the proficiency levels students are involved in. You can see for Level 1 that all the themes and topics are familiar and everyday type themes ranging from family to music to hobbies and interests, etc. These themes allow students to access their background knowledge and schema as they communicate on these topics. The vertical alignment comes from aligning the themes and topics to the 6 AP themes that are listed at the top. This ensures that students start to communicate on topics that fall in these areas. As they progress through each level and proficiency develops, they're able to do more and more when it comes to communication on these topics. For this curriculum, you can see that it designs 9 different units for Level 1 courses. Originally there were 6 units, and each unit was suggested to be explored for a period of about 6 weeks. This added up to about a full year. I decided to add 3 more units in order to give teachers and programs choice as to which topics and themes they explore based on interest and needs of their students in each program. Each unit contains the same materials, and we'll explore now kind of what those look like. Unit 1, What Makes Me Unique? Each unit has a title page that contains an essential question and 2 focus questions. Essential questions are these broad questions that don't necessarily have a singular answer and are meant to be able to transfer to many areas of life. They're great questions to have students think about and explore, not only about themselves, but for others as well. For LOTE classes, these drive communication and keep us grounded in a theme or topic, but they're also very broad. So for each unit, I developed 2 focus questions that narrow the scope of what we might talk about. You can see for Unit 1 the questions are, what personal details and information shape who I am, and what do my hobbies and interests say about me? Both of these narrow the focus down a little bit more, and you can start to see that it becomes easy on where we're going to go, probably with our focus of communication that includes greetings, introductions, ways we can give information about ourselves, and then in the second part of the unit, it looks more like we're talking about our likes and interests. Now that we've got some essential questions identified, we can start to look at our desired results. The Understanding by Design process, the UBD framework, or maybe more commonly known as backwards design from McTighe and Wiggins, dictates that before we ever do anything, we need to establish and recognize our desired outcomes. What is it we're really trying to do? This page is critical in aligning our topics and themes with the TEKS. Remember, we said that the TEKS have an overarching outcome of communication at desired proficiency levels. The student expectations outlined in the TEKS give us an even more detailed idea of what we want students to be able to do. So with that in mind, this page was created to articulate exactly what those outcomes should be as we explore this topic and this theme. You can see the essential questions, AP themes, and desired proficiency targets listed at the top. From there, we go to a unit summary, which can also serve as a rationale as to why this theme might be important to explore. The unit outcomes next is where we take the TEKS and look at the modes of communication and start to define exactly what we want to hear and see students do in this unit. If you look at the interpersonal mode, you can see evidence of the first student expectation in the TEKS, where it always says ask and respond to questions, as this learning outcome was created. Finally on this page, once again, you see the 2 focus areas that are written out. This page gives us a pretty good bird's eye view of what the expectations are going into the unit. Stage 2 in the backward design is finding acceptable evidence that will allow us to know if we're moving towards our desired results. This page is critical in understanding how we might design assessments later on that will align to what we're hoping to hear and see students do. For this page, I started off using the language again directly from the TEKS. The TEKS do a pretty good job of providing the proficiency descriptors for the levels that we're targeting. Notice how in this level we're targeting somewhere in the novice mid to novice high range. The TEKS provide us with descriptors of what both of those levels look like. When the writers of the TEKS got together to revise them in 2013, it was just after actual proficiency guidelines and performance descriptors were put together. Luckily for us, the writers of the TEKS leaned heavily on these documents, and we can see that in these descriptions. Below, I created another crosswalk of what proficiency descriptors might look like in Level 1 and next in Level 2. And again, I used the same criteria as earlier from language function, accuracy, context, and text type as they're organized in both the TEKS and the actual proficiency guidelines. After going through these past 2 pages of desired results and acceptable evidence, hopefully we should start to have a really clear idea of how well students are expected to communicate on the topics that are coming up in this unit. The next piece that we added into the curriculum were the summative assessments. Now that we have the desired results and an idea of what acceptable evidence looks and sounds like, it was time to create these assessments that could serve as targets or snapshots of how proficiency was increasing throughout the unit and really throughout the whole course of the year if we had them all up. I chose to create IPA, Integrated Performance Assessments, because of the nature of the assessments. I wanted this curriculum to get away from traditional practices of explicit language teaching and focus more on methods and approaches that would fall under the communicative language teaching umbrella. Things like task-based language teaching, comprehensible input, content-based instruction, etc. Therefore, I felt like in the absence of a true proficiency assessment, that an IPA gave us the best opportunity to see evidence of proficiency in a performance-based assessment. An IPA focuses on all 3 modes of communication and attempts to provide a real-world scenario in which communication is needed. Each mode of communication is dependent on the previous mode in order to complete the overall tasks of the IPA. I created a brief summary page here of the overall assessment context and the context of what would be done in each of the 3 modes. In all of the modes, or in all of the units, the interpretive mode is assessed first, and after that it really varies in order a presentational or interpersonal based on what's going on in each unit and the tasks that are given. And if we scroll down, you can now see that each mode of communication has its own summary page where the overview for that particular mode is restated. There's assessment resources that are provided and evaluation resources that are also provided. The resources provided differ based on the modes of communication, as do the evaluation resources. The evaluation resources come in the form of rubrics, which we'll see at the end of this unit. And the assessment resources for the interpretive mode are readings or audio resources along with comprehension guides for students to fill in. The presentational interpersonal resources are more student-facing pages that guide them and prompt them towards a discussion or presentation with their communication. Now that we have a clear idea of what we're going to assess this unit, we're ready to get into stage 3 of backwards design, the planning stage. Because the units are divided into 2 focus areas, everything we do from here on out will go towards one of those focus areas. Each focus area will have a planning page, vocabulary to support that focus area, as well as lesson exemplars that might show teachers how to plan for that particular focus area. You can see that this one has to do with the first focus area, what personal details and information shape who I am. Each planning document is organized by compelling guiding questions, performance outcomes, and input sources. Remember, the goal of this curriculum was to push instruction into more of a communicative approach and methodology, to get away from some of those traditional explicit practices of teaching grammar and vocabulary in isolation. So first, let's take a look at the compelling guiding questions. I wanted to provide teachers with questions instead of topics because they seem to invoke more inquiry and thought. I also wanted to come up with questions that teachers could explore in an individual lesson or over the course of maybe a couple of class periods that would be compelling to students. We know that motivation plays a huge part in how language learning takes place, especially in the classroom. And so these questions were hopefully designed to invoke the interest of students and provide some intrigue. And really, I wanted to move away from saying that day 1 was the name, birthday, and where I live day, and wanted the lessons to be more focused on communication than actual language. The questions are designed to create information or an opinion gap, and this is the backbone of task-based language teaching. It would give students the opportunity to exchange information, learn about something, or share their opinions as they explore the questions. Each unit's providing students and teachers with a list of about 20 compelling guiding questions, about 10 for each focus area. Similarly, the performance outcomes are real-world performances that students can do in the classroom to show that they can communicate. Think of them as informal or formative assessments. We want to see them and we want to hear them in the language, but we need them to do something. These are written similar to can-do statements with language functions of the TEKS that we want to see them perform. They're in a list form so teachers can choose which seem to be most engaging to their students and most appropriate for the lesson that they're planning. And then finally at the bottom we have a list of suggested input sources. With compelling guiding question in hand along with performance outcomes defined, we can now start to think of what we would do in the classroom to explore answers to those questions and get students to perform the tasks we want them to. Input is where we start after that. What resource, article, audio, authentic resource, or maybe it's the teacher that will be brought into the discussion as students start to interact with the language. This is a list of some of the ideas that can hopefully spark teachers' thought process as they plan. Next we have vocabulary maps. We have these for each focus question. And this was a tool that was a late addition to the curriculum for a couple of reasons. Throughout my time in the linguistics course last year, we talked about usage-based language and technology that helped us see different corpuses and databases and things that were designed to help us identify language. I wasn't sure how I could incorporate some of those tools into the curriculum, but it did spark my thought that teachers needed a way to support communication with their students. Providing a vocabulary map with that very purpose seemed pretty appropriate. I was hesitant because I didn't want to promote learning by vocabulary in isolation. But I did want there to be some intentional planning when it came to the type of language that we were using within our unit plans. So I crafted a disclaimer and added it to the top of the vocabulary list. And it reads something like this. Vocabulary maps provide a list of high-frequency words, phrases, and questions for a given topic. They're not a comprehensive list that students must memorize in order to be successful. Rather, they suggest language that may support both input that's provided by the teacher and resources, as well as output that students attempt to produce. This curriculum is designed to move away from traditional practices of teaching vocabulary in isolation. As such, teachers are encouraged to thoughtfully and intentionally plan out opportunities for students to engage in communication, where students encounter language in a variety of contexts. As teachers consider which words, phrases, and questions might best support students' communication, they'll undoubtedly modify, add to, and identify a variety of vocabulary that support their communication needs. I felt good after that disclaimer, so we're going to keep it at that. And this hopefully provides a framework to be intentional with the language we're providing in each unit and supporting communication with the students. The planning document gives us a pretty good idea and suggestions for compelling guiding questions, performance outcomes, and input, some of the building blocks for planning a lesson. I wanted teachers to be able to see what this looks like, so next we have lesson exemplars, again provided for each focus question. The lesson exemplar is intended to paint a picture of what the lesson might look like given a particular compelling guiding question and a performance outcome. So for each of these lessons, I used a template that was derived from Clemente and Terrell's Keys to Planning and Learning. The template focuses on creating a hook to start the lesson that connects the student's background, knowledge, and schema. It's something engaging that also elicits communication. After that, the lesson template goes through an input-output cycle, as referred to in Terrell and Clemente's book, where resources are presented to students in the form of authentic audios, readings, or maybe even the teacher being the source of input as students move through a variety of contexts. And as students interact with the input, they're prompted for opportunities to express and provide output. The last element of the lesson plan is the assessment. All output is something that provides opportunities for teachers to assess and evaluate. However, in the planning process, we want to be intentional and deliberate about what that might look like. Assessment opportunities are also defined in the lesson exemplars. And finally, at the end of each unit, we have pacing calendars. To wrap up each unit, we get to these calendars. Each unit is designed currently to be taught over about a 6-week period. This is obviously flexible, and teachers and districts can choose to explore topics and themes for really as long as they seem and deem appropriate. For the purpose of showing what this might look over time, there's a pacing calendar for a traditional and a block type of schedule. This is intended to give teachers an idea of how the compelling guiding questions could be paced throughout each unit and when they might give formative and summative assessments. Again, all of this is meant to be a guide and suggestion to teachers. We know that teachers have the autonomy to make their own decisions in the classroom, and they should, based on how they're the ones that interact with the students. The hope is that this doesn't provide a script for teachers, and it was never intended to, but to be more of a framework to inform teachers of their practices and help them as they develop and internalize different practices. Well, thanks for sticking around. This was such an amazing process, and it's still an ongoing process as there's still some of the assessment resources that need to be created. The great part about it is that the support that I have to make this available to people in the state of Texas. I've been given the go-ahead to start this process and now continue this process for levels 2 and 3. And hopefully this time next year I'll have a framework developed for those 2 levels as well. So thanks for joining me on this unpacking journey and taking the time to explore this curriculum with me. I look forward to answering any questions that you might have. My email address is listed at the bottom of the page, and I hope to talk to you soon. See you later.